Simone. I'm excited to talk to you today. Today, we are going to be talking about the perpetual male genocide.
Ooh.
And this is to say that males are in the process of being genocided in a way that's kind of irrelevant. Not for males, but for humans. But that it is something that has been going on for a long time throughout all of human history. And I think
I would
that
argue it's been happening since since sexes existed.
yeah, and I'd argue that it's important to internalize this in your world model, especially if you are a male and you are out there trying to date, because if you don't, you will make the mistake of so many males I've heard who are out there dating and go, it's just so hard. It's so unfair. I'm just not gonna find a partner. And it's like, yeah, it is. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, it is unfair and hard, and you need to get through that. And it's not even the hardest it's been. So, for example, when they're like, oh, come on, it couldn't have always couldn't be worse in the past. Between 8,000 to 4,000 years ago, there was a pronounced reduction in Y chromosome diversity, indicating a genetic bottleneck in male heritage. The period coincides with the transition from hunter-gatherer society to agricultural societies, known as the Neolithic period. While the exact ratio varies depending on the study and methodology, one striking estimate suggests that for every man who reproduced, 17 women did.
Oof.
So as bad as things are now,
Yeah, you think it's bad now.
they were worse for your ancestors.
God, it's brutal.
But
And as it stands now, tell me if I have this wrong.
okay.
In the United States, around 61% of men have kids versus
Yes.
like 80% of women.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's admittedly bad. You've basically got a coin toss as to whether or not you're going to pass on your line at all. And this is having kids. You know, we still argue that if you have one kid, you know, you've already basically halved your genetic future. I mean, you haven't replaced yourself at all. You need to have more than 2 kids for that. So, yeah, I mean, I wish there were better stats for us on like the number of men who have had 3 or more children, because that's who I would say has actually survived, you know, who's actually going to make it into the future. What I do know is that under 5% of women in America have more than 5 children.
So, by the way,
So
this is from Pew. It's 86% of women ages 40 to 44 are mothers, and this
86.
was in 2018.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
86%.
Except I
Now,
think most of those have only 1 or 2. And again, like only 5 have more than 5. And you know, those are the ones who I really see as
and
mattering.
contrast that 86% was in the same study, 61% of men. Now,
Yeah.
I want you to contrast those two numbers with over 50% of Gen X women planning to have no kids at all. If you're wondering how quickly population
Uh,
rates are going to drop or how much harder things are for you than your parents' generation, I am reminded of that scene when people are like, well, surely like everyone who tries and puts their all into this is going to make it through. I'm like, no. You don't get how bad it is. In Starship Troopers, there's this scene where they're like, oh, it's just random flashes of light. It's just like, it's just random statistical anomalies whenever there's like a low birth rate country. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is catastrophic. And then someone made a mistake. Someone made a big fucking mistake. And the mistake is so big, the ships are going down.
yeah.
Okay?
Plasma man from the planet.
Bug batteries. According to military intelligence, it'll be random.
Dips in fertility rate.
Steady as she goes, number 2. This isn't random.
Dips in fertility rate.
Someone made a mistake. Someone made a big goddamn mistake.
And when there's the guy who's looking at me and is like, well, why wasn't I able to get a partner? It's like sometimes it's just luck of the draw, sometimes it's just, but the game is harder than it has ever been.
Yeah.
Or at least in the past 100 years or so. No, I'll note here in a recent video, people were like, oh, Malcolm, you have no idea how hard it is for men in the dating market right now. No, I do. But when I give advice, like if you are not panicked at 25 and unmarried, you're not going to have a lot of kids and keep your genes in the gene pool.
this advice isn't taking into account how fair that advice is. It's taking into account that that advice is intended for somebody whose genes are going to stay in the gene pool. And that is still true for that section of our audience. The vast majority of the male audience on this show is just not going to reproduce likely. That's the reality of the world that we live in right now. So when I give advice on this is how you find a wife or something like that, and you're like, well, that advice would never apply to me, it's because it's not intended for you. You were unlikely to secure a wife anyway. It's intended for the person who was likely to have like 6 or 7 kids and secure a wife, which is a smaller segment of the audience. And you could say, well, why don't you give advice that applies to all the men in the audience? Because then I'd be lying. You know as well as I do how hard it is out there. That's why the advice I give is designed for the subsection who actually has a chance. People have become so normalized to the influencer grifter who goes out there and tells guys, hey, if you just do X, Y, and Z, then everything will work out for you. I'm not that kind of influencer. I will tell you, there are a huge portion of guys out there where if you go out and you do X, Y, and Z, it's still not going to work for you because things are just that hard. So when I give advice, it has to be attuned for the people who might actually get through this. But I would note here that everyone should be acting as if they are one of the people who is likely to get through this, because there's no point in acting in any other way. As we say, if you're in a trolley and you don't know if it's a yellow or blue trolley, but you know that on yellow trolleys, when you hit the red button in the center, it stops and doesn't go off the cliff. Because you don't know for certain, even if you think it's very likely you're in a blue trolley, it's still worth slamming that button. I think that training montage in Kill Bill is a good example of what modern dating is like. And I also ain't no Jordan Peterson. I am not going to go up here and cry for all of the men who have to face such unfairness within this generation. All I can say is I expect for you what I would have expected from myself, which is that if I'm going to go down, I want to go down fighting, with my face facing the enemy and the problem, not running, even if the enemy outnumbers me, even if the odds are against my favor. This is, of course, assuming that there isn't another pathway through, in which case, yes, break, run, find the other solution.
This is for you new people. I only have one rule. Everyone fights, no one quits. If you don't do your job, I'll shoot you.
Yeah. And I think the important thing is men need to recognize when they complain. The complaints I hear typically come from the perspective of, and this is not fair, this is unjust. And when you make that argument, this is unjust, the implication there is, and so we have to fix it. Like, you know, and I will not rest until this is resolved. If you don't stop fighting until it's resolved, you are not going to take care of yourself. You are not going, you know, like, you need to understand that I would argue that sexual differentiation in a species just means that you're going to have to live with the reality that that being male means that you have been given sort of a disposable gender status. I
Men
think
are
that
the disposable gender.
Yeah,
like you're
the
designed to be disposable. That's why.
in other words, men are supposed to be a way for really advantageous mutations to populate in a population really quickly, to expand. So you if you are suddenly a uniquely fit male due to some weird interesting mutation, can spread your genes immensely far throughout a population, arguably. Whereas, you know, if you're somewhat mediocre, you won't. So overall, the population benefits from only a very small number of men who have the best traits, making sure that those traits are passed on.
Mhm.
Everyone benefits. Whereas women are more just like the substrate on which things are carried forward. So they don't matter as much. And that's why they get to play. Although, you know, this is hardly, you know, in the history of mankind, a huge benefit, because historically gestating and raising children was very risky and painful, and you know,
Yeah,
not
about as many
necessarily your
women
best bet.
died in childbirth historically as men died in war.
Yeah. So it's not like women are rewarded with having kids. No. I mean, as a man, you won the lottery if you were having kids. As a woman, you were sent into battle for having kids. You know, it's dangerous stuff.
Yeah. It's very much like that Iron Man scene where somebody's like, oh, this is unfair.
And Dad went to 7-Eleven to get scratchers. I guess he won because that was 6 years ago.
Which happens, Dad's leave. No need to be a pussy about it. Here's what I need.
This happened to me. And it's like, don't be a pussy, you know, like,
Mm.
yeah, it's unfair. Like what womanly talk to be complaining about how unfair it all is. It is unfair. That's the point of two genders. Okay.
Mm.
Figure it out. And they're like, well, if things were more monogamous, even when things were more monogamous, you had a really high rates of outside fertilization. It's just that you were more likely to become a cuck in early America. But there's a secondary problem here, which is making this all uniquely hard. And in a way, women have done this to themselves, which is women tried to create a society that where they chose men who are better because that's what they want. They want a man who is better than them. Like that's what most women are programmed to want, right?
Absolutely.
But then they're
yeah.
like, but we also want equal pay. I love this like get better line that so many women, they're like, we need men who are better. And I'm like, what do you mean by better? And they're like, well, by that I mean that he has more money than me or he has a better job than me. And I'm like, wait, didn't you fight for gender equality and pay?
Yeah,
And they're
that's
like,
the problem.
yeah, I mean, I guess I did. And it's like, so do you understand why there aren't men who are better than you and earning
Little
more than
problem
you
here. Yeah.
who don't have partners? Do you get it now? This is the result of the equal pay thing. Women still want men who are better. And this is what this whole like, I want better movement is about. It is women not understanding what they've done to themselves, which is, yeah, you do. You're biologically programmed to want that. But you removed the better
Mhm.
by ensuring that only I want a guy who's more educated than me. Well, then that's not going to happen. Look at the statistics on who's getting college degrees now. You
Mhm.
created this world.
Minor issue there. Yeah, I mean, and I struggle with this, but I think any effort to correct this for like from a governmental standpoint, like let's systematically disempower women. It's a stupid argument to me.
No, you just got to understand it's harder than it's ever been, and that's not necessarily.
Yeah, the big thing is take your foot off the neck of men if you are a business or government. Like stop this anti-male stuff because you're only hurting everyone, including women who really want to find a partner but can't find enough men who are at their level or above because that's what they want. So
But
you
the
are actively hurting women by doing this to men. And I think that's what's artificial is just
Mhm.
stop, like take the cement weights off of them and they will do a lot better. But also
you can't get there.
culture that fosters male excellence too. I think
But I don't think it's possible to get there from where we are today,
yeah.
except for the way we raise our own kids and do
Yeah.
our own families. At a government level, at a culture level, it's very hard to win this fight.
Well, but I mean, we're up against a really big thing, even when we look at this culturally, when you consider the number of couples undergoing IVF who actively choose female embryos.
It's, by the way, so if you look at microsort clinics within the US,
Okay.
90% of couples seek treatment for family balancing reasons. That means they already have kids and they want more of one gender than the other, and 80% choose girls. Now, I should note this isn't the case overall with choices, but that's because you're often including like Asians in the data set and they always choose boys, which messes things up. But yes, one thing where people can be like, oh, well, this is just a strict negative that men are getting so fucked over uniquely within this generation. And it's like, well, not really, because if you win as a man, if you have even a few kids, much less if you have tons of kids, the genetic reward of being a competent male who won through that genetic strategy and having lots of kids is dramatically better in this generation than maybe at any other time in human history, because so few men are going to pass this particular gauntlet, especially pass it through means other than being a unga bunga ISIS type religious extremist who abandons technology and abandons competition and is just no. I mean, they're winning off of a completely different selection criteria.
Oh yeah.
But their children aren't going to be relevant to the future of our species. The reward for being a competent, technologically engaged, economically engaged male with a lot of kids for this generation is astronomically large, much bigger than like in our parents' generation or something like that, where 60% were succeeding. But here I want to also talk about the desire, because you hear this, oh, there's not. I mean, everybody knows that there's people out here. I shouldn't even say surely they're not to set up this. Everybody knows that there's women and feminists who have fantasized about a society without men. This is a persistent fantasy that individuals have. We even have this crazy guy who emails us all the time, and he wants to create, he's like, oh, the way you fix this is to create, these big sperm banks where you have celebrities and ultra wealthy and ultra high IQ men who are giving out sperm to most of the world's females. And that's the way this ends up working out.
Who then just have female babies.
Yeah,
Right,
they just have
correct
female
me.
babies. That it's pre-selected for only female babies. And I'm like,
It's not a solution. But no, I mean, this is not just the one person's delusion. I think there's a lot of people who are just like, oh, it's very similar to like, well, the world would be better without humans is very, to me, similar to the world would be better without men.
Well, you get this in Charlotte Perkin Gilman's book Herland, which was published in 1915. Is a feminist utopia novel describes an isolated society composed entirely of women who reproduce through parthenogenesis. Here's a quote from the book. They had no kings and no priests and no aristocracies. They were sisters, and as they grew together, not by competition, but by united action. And we're gonna have a
Morty episode with the all-female world. What is it they said to each other? Like when they greeted each other, it was like, how are you feeling? Or like, I acknowledge.
Yeah, how are you feeling? No, but the funny thing is that like we know, and we're going to do a separate episode on all female organizations and societies and why they always fail, because they do always fail. They just like explode so quickly. It's hilarious. But we'll touch on that a bit here. But like, no, I mean, and people are like, what if women ruled the world? There wouldn't be wars. And like, actually, we can look at periods from medieval Europe when queens were in power versus kings, and queens had dramatically more wars than kings. Like, no, women are not more like benevolent as rulers. Like even just like the UK's history, like Bloody Mary or something like that. Like they're not excluded from being genocidal maniacs. They're not included from. No, it's crazy. Bloody Mary, by the way.
She is the worst. She is the worst person in the world. Huge, skank, terrible. What did I tell you, huh? The worst. She's the worst in the world.
If you study her history, like her sister tried to, after taking power, who was that? Queen Elizabeth was her sister?
Yes.
And tried to keep her alive and was like, hey, I can give you like a good life. You just can't come back to power. And she just kept trying to kill her, despite all of the kindness that her sister showed her, because, her heart kept taking over her brain. But hold on, we've also got the Umoja village in Kenya, founded in 1990. Umoja is a women-only village created by Samburu women who were outcast from their communities. This village is like a safe space, and I'm like, okay, this could maybe work if you have safe spaces for women who were like attacked or something like that. Like obviously they're not going to work for that many generations, but it could work. But then I was reading more on women's only communities where they like reject men as like a concept to try to create this. And I read one where I was like, oh my God, I need to learn what happened to this.
Okay.
And I read some videos on failed women's where it's spelled was like a WOMYN communities that have like fallen apart since their inception.
Well, I mean, if they're called that.
Well, yeah, these communities separated between the 1970s and 1980s across the United States and Canada, where they wanted to create a male-free domain. But then there was one that started more recently, and I could find a bunch of articles on it from 2016. And oh my God, I so want to know what happened to them. If we did like an investigative type podcast, I'd be so into this. If any of our fans can find out what happened to this group, please, please, please send us, because I'm interested. So I'll quote from an article on them. It wasn't just, oh, here's a book, let's pretend we're in the book. It's using the book as a design document. This is, they read the Her Society thing, that 1915 book. Says Cat White. She's a pioneer of Herland, a Facebook group of over 5,000 members interested in creating an eco-commune in South America inspired by the, quote, land without hymns that Gilman described. In May, White is giving up her apartment in Fresno, California, and headed south in the truck and camper the group purchased after 2 years of saving. She says once they reach South America, by road and ferry, she will meet up with a handful of European Herland pioneers. Their ultimate destination is somewhere in the jungle on the border of Guyana and Venezuela.
Oh, no.
Ooh, this happened in 2016. I want to know what happened to this group. It is an area that is uninhabited, so we're not pushing anyone out. And it's warm enough so that we don't have to worry about freezing and those sorts of things. So it's a very friendly area for living, White says.
Okay.
The Herlanders won't say exactly where it is, just that they've asserted agreements from the relevant government. This is the area that Venezuela wants to attack right now, by the way, if you've been paying attention to this. White says once they arrive, they'll settle down and start building, making room for the 100-plus second wave Herlanders from around the world who will help, quote, set an example for the world in general that it can be done, that people can get together and live.
Why didn't she just do this in Fresno?
I don't think she has.
Why does she have to go to the jungles of?
If she had competence, she'd have money. If she had money, she'd be able to do it somewhere that people wanted to be instead of the middle of the jungle.
The amount of money you need to make this work in the jungle outside Venezuela is a lot more than the money you would need to even look. Remember, we've had these episodes where we talk about how really unpaired single women are basically nuns to the state. They're wards of the state. Yeah. It's very easy to live off social services. The social safety net, especially for unpaired women in the US, is pretty robust. You could easily create some kind of very low income community in Fresno that becomes this weird autonomous zone.
I think she thinks she's going to do.
Okay.
So she thinks that they're going to like harvest for food in the forest, because like her core thing was, well, I'm not going to freeze to death at night, right? Like that's what she cared about, right? Which to me shows she's planning on the barest subsistence of living.
Okay, but you know, what about the maggots that lay eggs and the wounds that open up from her, you know, various bug bites that she gets?
This is why I want to see. I know that if I go find the settlement, it's just going to be like a bunch of bleached bones and no, it's. I need to go on an archaeological expedition to find.
No, because what happens is they show up there, they spend a night, and then they go to some eco lodge and they just nope out of there. You know, I don't think
she had enough money. Keep in mind, she was planning to drive down there with her camper.
And I wish her well. I do. I don't want bad things to happen to people. She was someone's daughter, you know, like.
I mean, she seems like a bad person if she wants to do this.
She doesn't want to hurt anyone. She doesn't want to coerce anyone.
She considers harmony as being only possible without a group of people who is 50% of the world's population that has, let's be honest, made most of the world's inventions, economic opportunities.
Well, yeah, she's obviously misguided, but just because someone has the wrong information, I mean, we've had misguided beliefs.
Hold on.
We've moderated.
When you are prejudiced to this degree, you don't get to use misguided as an excuse. Just because our society has excused doesn't mean that misandry isn't pure evil. But anyway, hold on. I'm not done. The idea of an eco-feminist commune may sound radical, but it's actually nothing new. In the 1970s and 80s, separatist communities known as Women's Land, with that weird spelling, sprang up throughout the rural US and Canada, inspired, and also some by the Women's Liberation Movement, also some cities. Like I think some of the most successful ones were actually in like central Chicago or something. Because I've watched documentaries on them. They've all fallen apart now. As somebody pointed out, most of the women's lands in the country either have no residents today or a single resident. The one of the largest has 5. That's Subahama. Subamah.
Well, every time the patriarch leaves the compound of some FLDS family, they become a woman's land. It's great. And they get along, the sister wives, I'm sure. Well, not always, but often.
No, the sister lives I've seen seem pretty bitchy to each other.
Oh.
And there's even that one case of the man who like installed like receivers all over his house. So he could hear what they were all saying.
Well, but he also used them to like sort of terrorize them and make them develop all sorts of paranoia against each other. So yeah, but anyway. Some of them got along.
But anyway, key details of the original plan included the community was to be cashless and supported permaculture farming. Oh my God, permaculture farming in the jungle. Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how small the topsoil is in the jungle? You could get 1 season, maybe.
Yeah, that's more of a foraging situation. But
men were not allowed, but transgender people were.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to create some problems. And the exact location was kept secret. So I feel it's like a great quest I need to see set up. I love some of the words that they ended up using here when talking about the feminist communes. They said, according to Cummings, when you're living in a feminist commune, quote unquote, freedom isn't necessarily the operative word. They say, I will say that having it be women only can be very challenging. I struggle with how to limit my ability to have male visitors here, she says. It's a lot like being in a marriage, quite frankly. Wait.
Huh?
Hold on. Did you catch that? Okay.
No.
She's like, I struggle with how I have male visitors here. It's a bit like being in a marriage.
Why would she have male visitors? I'm confused.
No. Okay, sexual visitors, people to have sex with her.
Why?
That's why she
Dude,
would still...
no. You don't get to have sex with men if you're swearing off men. No.
It's clear that's what she wants. But hold on.
Buy a dildo. We still have to make it
funny. Clearly. Why else would you want males? Otherwise, you could get whatever else you wanted from females.
I don't know. Maybe there aren't any. I've never met a female plumber, and who else will build the?
What man? Hold on, and this is what you're missing in her statement. Okay, clearly she was somebody who's previously married. What man complains that a male plumber comes to his house? Okay, she's basically saying I have to sneak in men to perform this task that only men can perform for me, just like I had to when I was married.
I don't know what's going on here. I can't understand people.
Into this. What?
I don't. This doesn't make any sense to me, and I am confused. But yeah,
all right. Well, we'll do another episode on all female companies because they are so hilarious.
We can't go into it now. I'm so curious.
Oh no, because it's a whole episode worth of content. Because women, whenever they try to like do all female things, in fact, I don't think I've heard of and I'll look up for this, a single all female company, settlement, tribe in history that didn't within like 3 years descend into all hating each other and mass murdering.
So I had to ask an AI to see if it could find any all-female companies that ever worked, and it dithered for a bit, trying to give me companies that were led by women, but eventually admitted that while it had been tried a number of times, it had never functioned.
Well, here's the thing. I think that there are weird ways in which functionally all-female communities thrive, but they work with men. We were talking in another episode about sword and shield relationships and talking about how, if you're talking about Vikings or Spartans, there is this, women are managing the local community. The men are out, but the men are out. Yeah, but like these are women who are doing all the things that a local village would do to function, and they are fine without men.
One of the things I'd point out here, and I will give a bit of a highlight from this next episode, is they were acting a drill sergeant about female versus male candidates. And one of the things that they noticed was that both men and women take orders better from a man than a woman.
Oh
Women don't
no.
like to have another woman in charge of them. They don't see why another woman should be in charge of them. And then he says when they didn't explain it with men, but this is what you see broadly in the data as well. Women hate women bosses.
Yeah,
Women
there's actually a really funny comedic short. I'll see if I can dig it up. This like college comedy group that's just hilarious, where they have a class on like business writing as a woman or something. And it's just like you add an exclamation mark to everything so that you're non-threatening. And just like it's just there's something about it's horrible. And yeah, being a woman sometimes really sucks. Someone who listens to this podcast has been writing to us about disturbing standards changing in the military and pointed out how standards for what women have to carry in terms of like running with weight are significantly lower in the military than the standards for men. So like to pass with a perfect score, I think women only need to carry something like,
But
we'll
women
just say like
women are
260
the
pounds.
same, only different strengths because they're socialized differently.
But
right?
the problem with this is that a man, like a male soldier with his full body armor and backpack, would weigh like way over this amount. So women are getting essentially passing scores in the military, and they are not physically able to carry one of their colleagues in an emergency, which is just
This
really
reminds me
disturbing.
so much that there was the fires in California recently. We'll probably But
Yeah.
one of the heads of the fire department, she's like the assistant director or something, and she's a woman, and she goes, "Sometimes I get asked questions like, could you carry a man out of a burning building?" And all I have to say is, what's a man doing in a burning building? Clearly, he's made bad choices.
You're like,
And I'm like,
that's
oh my
his
God,
problem.
what is wrong with you?
Yeah, that one's good.
Keeper. That's a keeper. No, I mean, this whole DEI thing is getting people killed at this point. Like, we need to burn this down and understand that women don't want women bosses. Okay. I actually would go so far as to say if there is pay equality in a society, something is wrong with that society. Because women do not want the types of jobs that earn more. Women do not want to work for women who are their managers. This is clear in the data.
I don't know though. Yeah, well, how do you reconcile this with societies that are less gender egalitarian, and yet you see more women going into STEM jobs, for example? What's your answer to that?
Well, that's the point. But why are these women going into STEM jobs? The more gender egalitarian, the more choices you give women, the more they choose subservient roles, the more they choose womanly roles. When you remove choices for women and men can use them like personal slaves, then they put them in positions where they can earn the most money. Ironically, gender egalitarianism, letting women do what they want, leads to women choosing lives of service rather than lives of dominance, not striving for more money constantly, because that's not what women are really built to do or find satisfaction in.
Yeah, back to that theme that we talked about in another conversation, where women have been raised to normalize around very masculine life goals, when that may not actually be what derives the most happiness.
Through all of human history, it's like in like an Omegaverse universe or something. You had alphas only writing our books and our literatures and our music and our plays. Very few women historically contributed to culture. And there's some, like Mary Shelley or whatever, but they're rare. And so when women achieved sort of freedom or a degree of equality, they cued to what they wanted from their lives for what was in the media that they had access to growing up, what was in the Western canon. And that had all been optimized around what men want from men's lives. And so they would do all this stuff and they would be unhappy. This is fundamentally why, if you look at the great article, The Paradox of Women's Happiness, the more freedom women achieve in a society, the less fulfilled and happy they are. As we have seen declining rates of women's happiness, women used to be happier than men on average when they were stuck as housewives.
Really? So like
the 60s or 70s, yeah, it was always women were happier, men were less happy. But as women achieved freedom, it has flipped, and now men are much more happy than women.
I want to see these stats. That's
and
so
this
interesting.
differentiator has increased over time. Yeah.
Gosh,
Anyway.
that sucks.
Love you to death, Simone. You are the best wife any man could ever ask for, and I hope you feel fulfilled with this role. because
You sound so HR. Like,
I
how,
hope
how
you're
would you
fulfilled with
rate
this
this
role.
marriage?
If you're not, I can
1
work
to
on a
10?
severance package.
Would you like to give me anonymous feedback through this form? Please press 5 if so. Oh my God, Malcolm, I love you so much. You're perfect. You inspire me. Our kids love you. You're fun. You're the spark. You bring the spark into our lives. No,
So,
you're the best.
woman.
And I don't know. I just, it's sad that a lot of guys don't get to experience what you're experiencing, you know, like the family life, the having kids. But
Hey, we got an option for these guys. Look, if you're like, look, I want my genes to be part of the future, even though like almost all guys wash out, like it's really hard. We are building a system where if you want to put the pragmatist foundation, that's the foundation that runs like RDA and pronatalism and everything like that, in the future we have planned for our civilization, in your will, we will also take full genome sequence of you if you send that to us and put it in sort of the founding formation of whatever we end up creating as a society. So if we're successful, maybe one day in the distant future, people will be using that either to create humans or to create people in AI environments or to create whatever use it may have. Like, I can't promise. I'm not like, oh, give us money and then one day. I'm not saying give us all your money. I'm not saying like everything in your will. I'm not saying donate everything. I'm just saying if you're a donor and you want your thing on file, it will be attached along with how much you've donated, who you are, what you did. You know, you let us know. And I am happy to include that for future generations, because I can think like if I had not won this particular game and I saw a couple that did, but I was like, look, but realistically, I just didn't win the genetic lottery, or I happen to be same-sex attracted, or I, you know, what do I do? This would be a potential interesting outlet for me. So if you're interested in that, reach out to us, because we've got to make sure that we have everything right in the way like the will is structured and the way all that is structured. But otherwise, I love that, because I'm like, hey, that's also a way for me to give back to the people who aren't participating in the very few who have broken through at this point in history.
Well, also there are many ways to live a really meaningful life, and there are plenty of childless men who have had more of an impact on the course of humanity than men with children. It's just harder. So I think no matter
Probably
what,
not. I'm going to be honest. I can think of some childless women who have had a big impact on history, but it's actually fairly rare for childless men.
as writers, as people who've influenced culture,
Oh, like if they're gay or something, yeah, sure, that happens. Sorry, that's the thing. Like, that if you are a successful person as a man and you don't become successful after death, you're likely going to be genetically successful as well. Like, women, there's not like famous straight writers who don't have like partners who they've knocked up. Sorry, what's that face?
a little harsh, but
The world is harsh. Okay, what am I doing for dinner tonight? We're reheating yesterday's.
we're trying out air frying the whatever, like
I'm
Sichuan
wondering
chicken.
what the restaurant is putting in it, because it has a lot more flavor when the restaurant serves it, and I don't know what's causing it.
I'll try. I actually didn't put MSG in it because I wanted to see what you thought of it, like it was. So
It tastes very tasteless.
But, what do you want me to do with it? Your move.
Well, my move, I'm gonna research.
Are you doing that right now?
No, I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I'm gonna do it like right after this is over, before I go down.
Okay. You
I
let
love
me
you.
know. I love you too. Hey, if you have used IVF and it was within the past 4 years and you used some form of PGTA, like you had your embryos biopsied and sent off to a company, you might qualify for a really cool study that is being conducted by a fellow Basecamp person that we are working with through hardyA.org. You can get also, if you qualify, $100 as a participant and free vouchers for whole genome sequencing for your family, which is really cool. So if you feel like you might qualify here, you can email Elan at minervagenomics.com. That's ELAN. And if you have any questions first, you can email us at partners@pragmatistfoundation.org. Also, NatalCon, it's happening this March in Austin. We'd love to see you there. And we're definitely going to organize some kind of base camp meetup in addition to the conference. We will be there the whole time. So consider going. You can get 10% off your registration by entering the code Collins at checkout, and we would really like to see you there.
How'd you mess that up? Did you think you'd sent the link?
I
or
sent
what?
it to my dad because I'm so smart and capable. I can function. Sometimes I can even breathe successfully. Like 80% of the
TikTok
time.
thing is crazy right now. That Trump's keeping TikTok alive, and all these communists were like, the U.S. government's evil. You can't trust any politician. And it's like, hey, Trump's got your back, buddy.
No.
Mhm.
Yeah, no.
I am just thrilled for that. Come on. This is crazy. Crazy timeline to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more like there's this sword of Damocles hanging over TikTok, and as soon as China or TikTok does something to piss him off, then Shazam, it's gone. I just love, like, why it would be illogical for him to not maintain this optionality. It would be
Yes,
crazy.
great for immediate, totally in his control utility against China.
Yeah, he has
But he
this
does
immediate,
need to
like,
eventually get rid of it.
or
I mean,
let's just say he wants to control the media cycle. You know, like there's a little bit, you know, people are really rumbling about his, you know, him getting something done that he really needs to get done, but it's unpopular. Oh, guess what? I'm also going to do ban TikTok, bury the story, done. Like
Bury
it's
the
such
story.
a good bargaining chip. I think, you know, it would be insane for him to not do what he's doing.
But he
So,
does have to eventually drop that sword, because what we are learning now is they are refusing to sell. Like, they have buyers, they're refusing to sell. The only reason you'd refuse to sell is if the new buyers are going to find out that, yes, you were working with the CCP, feeding lots of information to them and trying to brainwash America's youth. Like, that's the only reason not to sell. Like, why else would you not sell? That makes no sense. And they did the same thing in India when India passed this, as they refused to sell, which to me shows, like, I don't like that people are having their like livelihoods destroyed by this, and all of the content creators like us. Like, if we had built up a big following there, it'd be terrible. But like, it's obvious the CC, and it's not like it's like a new thing. Like, anyone who built a platform there built it knowing they were building it on CCP spyware. This is a
always.
country that is
My
actively
impression
carrying out
was
a
if I
genocide,
put
mind
TikTok
you.
on my phone, I now have a hot mic at all times.
No, but I mean, I love when the progressives are like, China's not as bad. I'm like, you do know they're in the middle of a genocide, right?
I mean, you know, speaking of genocide, let's get into
Speaking of
it.
genocide, let's talk about the male genocide. So I'm going to get started. Okay, Simone?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Are you gonna help me clean the table with that lime juice, Toasty?
What?
Toasty and Titan are building cleaning solution for our table by squeezing out the limes.
Can I do it too? You can, but we got it all. Squeeze. What's taking so long? I want to do it too. Can I do it too, Mommy?
Yeah, you want to try?
Yeah.
All right, I'll get you a squeezer.